In the quiet heart of Texas, tragedy struck when the sheriff's paralyzed daughter was left to die, until a lone cowboy rode through the storm to save her life. A story of courage, love, and redemption. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Where are you watching from? Let's get started. The sun had barely set over the endless plains of Crescent Valley, Texas, when the town's long peace began to fade into memory. For years, Sheriff Ben Callahan had been the kind of man everyone respected, tough on crime, fair to a fault, and loyal to his people. His daughter Emily was the light of his world. She had inherited her father's stubbornness and her mother's smile. Known as the best barrel racer in the county, Emily spent most of her youth chasing dreams under the blazing Texas sun, unaware of the tragedy that would soon change everything. It was a summer evening when the accident happened, one of those nights where the air itself seemed too still, as if the world were holding its breath. Emily had been driving her pickup down the old Millstone Road after a rodeo competition. A sudden storm hit and the dirt road turned slick as ice. The headlights caught a flash of movement, a stray deer, and before she could react, the truck swerved, flipped, and tumbled into a ravine. The sound of twisting metal echoed through the valley, and in that moment her life would never be the same. By the time help arrived, she was barely conscious. Doctors in Dallas fought for hours to save her. When she woke in the hospital, she couldn't feel her legs. The diagnosis was final, a spinal cord injury, permanent paralysis from the waist down. Sheriff Callahan stayed by her side for weeks, refusing to leave the hospital even for food. His uniform hung loosely on his shoulders now. His once steady hands trembled. Emily tried to stay strong for him, but each time she saw her wheelchair, the silence between them grew heavier, filled with the weight of unspoken pain. When she was finally brought home to their ranch outside town, the world felt smaller. The once bustling house now echoed with loneliness. Neighbors visited at first, bringing casseroles and soft words, but as months passed, visits grew fewer. The sheriff's duties pulled him away often, chasing thieves and handling the county's troubles. Emily learned to wheel herself through the house, feeding the horses from a distance, staring at the empty corral she once dominated. Nights were the worst, long, quiet, filled with memories of who she used to be. The wind would whistle through the porch rails, whispering her name like a cruel reminder. As if fate hadn't punished them enough, another storm struck one evening, this time far more violent. Sheriff Callahan was miles away on duty when a call came through his radio, a collapsed bridge, multiple injuries. He had to leave. He promised he'd be home by midnight, kissed his daughter on the forehead, and drove off into the storm. Emily watched him disappear into the rain, her heart uneasy. The lightning flashed against the horizon, and she whispered a silent prayer, clutching the old cross necklace her mother had given her before she passed. Hours later, the power went out across the ranch. The house went black except for the flicker of lightning through the windows. Emily sat in her wheelchair, clutching a flashlight when she heard it. The sound of engines approaching. Headlights cut through the darkness, stopping near the barn. Her father wasn't expected home yet. Fear crawled up her spine. Then came laughter. Cruel male voices outside, calling her father's name. She recognized one of them instantly, Dale Briggs, a man her father had arrested years ago for armed robbery. He had promised revenge, and now he'd come to deliver it. They didn't know she was alone. "Come on out, Sheriff!" one of them shouted. "We just want to talk." Emily froze. She tried to stay quiet, praying they'd leave, but then a bottle shattered, a Molotov cocktail, and flames burst to life near the barn door. The fire spread fast, licking up the walls, and thick black smoke filled the air. Emily tried to move, tried to wheel toward the back exit, but debris blocked her path. Her heart pounded. She screamed for help, her voice cracking in the smoke. "Somebody, please!" she cried. But the only answer was the roar of the fire. Just when her vision began to blur and the world tilted into chaos, she saw a shadow through the smoke. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving against the flames. The door burst open, and a man stepped in, his hat soaked from rain, his coat smoldering at the edges. It was Eli Mercer, a quiet cowboy who lived out near the canyon, a drifter most folks barely knew. He didn't hesitate for a second. He threw his duster coat over Emily, coughed through the smoke, and lifted her into his arms. "Hang on, ma'am," he said through gritted teeth. "I got you," the barn creaked, flames swallowing the rafters above. Eli carried her out as burning wood crashed behind them, running through mud and rain until they reached the horse corral. The mare neighed wildly, spooked by the fire, but Eli calmed her with a steady voice and set Emily onto the saddle, wrapping his arm around her waist. She was trembling, half-conscious, whispering her father's name. "You're safe now," Eli murmured, mounting behind her. "Ain't nobody dying tonight." Then, with one sharp command, he kicked the horse forward, galloping into the storm as the ranch burned behind them like a dying star on the horizon. The rain poured harder as Eli urged his horse down the muddy road, the flames of the Callahan ranch fading into the distance. Emily clung to him weakly, coughing from the smoke still trapped in her lungs. Every jolt of the horse sent pain through her back, but she held on. Eli's jaw was tight with focus, his soaked hat dripping into his eyes. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the road ahead, a narrow path winding through the desert. He knew it was a long ride to Doc Harlan's place, but stopping wasn't an option, not while she was still breathing. As they rode through the storm, Emily's mind drifted in and out of consciousness. Memories flashed, her father teaching her to ride, her mother's laughter, the sound of the sheriff's badge clinking when he hugged her. She wanted to stay awake, but her body was failing. "Don't let me die," she whispered faintly, her words nearly drowned by the thunder. Eli tightened his grip around her shoulders. "Ain't gonna happen, miss," he said softly. "You're tougher than any storm." His voice, low and calm, seemed to steady her heartbeat just enough to keep her alive. By the time they reached Harlan's clinic, the storm had turned the dirt road into a river of mud. Eli jumped off the horse, lifting Emily in his arms and kicking the clinic door open. "Doc!" he shouted, his voice hoarse. Dr. Harlan, an old man in his 60s, rushed out of his office. "Good Lord, Eli, what happened?" he asked, helping him lay Emily on the examination table. Eli's chest heaved with exhaustion. Fire! She inhaled too much smoke. "Get her help, now!" Harlan nodded, working fast, placing an oxygen mask over her face. Eli staggered back, leaning against the wall, his own arms bleeding from burns. Hours passed like days. The rain stopped before dawn, leaving the desert silent except for the distant drip of water from the eaves. Eli hadn't moved from his chair. He sat by Emily's bedside, his coat singed and his hat resting on his knee. The doctor came out and handed him a cup of coffee. "She'll make it," Harlan said quietly. "You got her here just in time." Eli nodded, exhaling a breath he didn't know he was holding. "She's the sheriff's girl," he murmured. "Didn't even think. Just saw the fire." The doctor smiled faintly. "You've got a good heart, son. Ben Callahan's a lucky man." When Emily woke, sunlight was streaming through the window. Her throat ached, and every breath burned, but she was alive. Her eyes fluttered open to find Eli sitting beside her, his arm wrapped in gauze, his clothes still damp. "Hey there," he said softly, tipping his hat. "How you feeling?" She blinked, trying to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "You saved me," Eli shrugged. "Reckon I just did what anyone should have done." But the truth was written all over his face. The exhaustion, the soot, the burns. This wasn't something just anyone would have done. "Why?" she asked weakly. He looked down. "Your pa once saved my life years ago. Guess it was my turn." 2 days later, Sheriff Callahan returned. He'd heard rumors on the road, smoke seen from the highway, men talking about the fire. He rushed home only to find ashes where his barn once stood. His heart stopped until Doc Harlan's assistant came running, shouting that Emily was alive. When he burst into the clinic, his knees nearly gave out at the sight of her, pale but breathing, his daughter safe in bed. Beside her sat Eli, hat in hand, looking like a man who'd been through hell and back. "Son," the sheriff said, voice shaking, "if there's anything I can do for you." Eli stood and shook his head. "Just glad she's all right, sir." Over the next few weeks, Crescent Valley buzzed with the story of the rescue. Folks who barely knew Eli before now tipped their hats when he passed. Donations came in to rebuild the Callahan Ranch. lumber, tools, food, and supplies. The sheriff tried to repay Eli, but he refused every offer. Instead, he helped quietly, fixing fences, tending horses, rebuilding walls alongside Emily. As she watched him work, something changed inside her. For the first time since the accident, she smiled again. He never treated her like she was broken. He treated her like she was strong, capable, like she'd always been. By spring, the ranch stood tall again. Emily had begun therapy with new leg braces, practicing to stand with determination in her eyes. One morning, under the golden Texas sunrise, she managed to take her first steps, slow, trembling, but real. Eli stood nearby, ready to catch her if she fell. When she turned toward him, tears streamed down her cheeks. "I'm walking," she said, her voice cracking. Eli smiled, tipping his hat. "Told you you were tougher than any storm." Sheriff Callahan watched from the porch, pride filling his tired eyes. "Guess I owe you more than I'll ever be able to repay," he said softly. That night, under the stars, the three of them sat around a small fire where the old barn once stood. The wind was gentle, carrying the smell of mesquite and new life. Emily leaned back in her chair, gazing up at the stars, her heart finally at peace. Eli's horse grazed nearby, the sound of its hooves rhythmic and calm. "Do you ever think about leaving, Eli?" she asked quietly. He looked at her for a long moment, then smiled. "Used to. Not anymore." She nodded, understanding. Crescent Valley had lost much, but that night it had found something stronger. Hope, courage, and the bond that only true heroes leave behind.